Students apply to college with the end in mind by deciding what they want first. As a result, they don't just get into college, they get into their own vision of their future.
It's true, we do that. Good morning, you guys. Once again, it's May 23rd, and this is a School News Roundup. We are Rockstar Academics. We've been Rockstar Academics. I've been Rockstar Academics since 2017, and I'm glad to have you aboard today. This is Saturday before Memorial Day weekend, and while I think I'd have been at the beach today in a normal year, and I think many people are at the beach, we're still here at the quarantine cabin and still talking about the news. This is what we do on Saturday mornings. Now we are in our 10th week of broadcasting. Something very close to 500 people now have joined us for this program, and we're getting it dialed in. This morning we've been up all this last week. We've been getting ready for a big workshop that we're doing this afternoon after the broadcast at 12 o'clock. It is an adaptation of a program that I've been running for several years, and that is the Gap Years and Goals workshop at 12 o'clock. So if you have been thinking about joining us for that and still on the fence, now is the time to go to rockstaracademics.com, click on courses and coaching, and get yourself a spot in that 12 o'clock workshop. So there's my top of the hour promo, and then we're going to start with what we usually start with, which is the news headlines over at schoolnewssaturdays.com. And I'm going to share my screen just for a second or two so we can have the headlines up in front of us. Let's see what we've got here. Sure. Don't worry, those are not all slides for this morning. Good Lord. that's just my master book of slides for
Death by PowerPoint.
Yeah, don't worry. We have one slide today. This is all it is. I just can't figure out how to show it to you. There we go. So the headlines this week. It's so funny. You know, we always make the joke, wow, it was a really slow news week this week. What we've been doing here is we've been collecting the headlines about education. Let's see if I can make that full screen. Sorry, guys. Everybody close your eyes and nobody get motion sickness. There we go. Does that look kind of like a full screen of slide for just a second there? Yeah. Okay, there we go. So what we've been doing is we've been reading the headlines about education, both K through 12 education and also higher education, which is my career focus, for about 2.5 months now, because in the first week or so, I talked to a whole bunch of parents on this broadcast who said, oh my goodness, what on earth would I have done if I hadn't tuned in here? Because, you know, all the standardized tests were being canceled and things like that at that time. And what we found out was that a lot of parents don't have really good access to news about education. School districts, especially at that time, were scrambling just to figure out how to have instruction online and doing a better and worse job of communicating what was going on. And of course, news about education doesn't only come from the school district, but from the test deliverers and the colleges and private education companies. And so we started building a sort of drudge report for school and education news over at schoolnewssaturday.com. And it just started out as a side, as a resource for me to give to people who I talk to, clients and families who are trying to make education decisions. And now it's a daily project, isn't it, Gene?
Well, fortunately, it's not an onerous project. Yeah, we do.
That's a good point. It is a lot of fun. That's really the main reason that we do it, because if it weren't fun, we could probably find something else to do instead. But we do have this great website over there, and I'm actually going to show it to you because why not? Let's see. Here we go. Because it's come such a long way, you guys, which is kind of exciting. So, so these days I don't know. Are you guys seeing that? Seeing my screen? No?
No, they're looking at Facebook right now.
That's not what we should be looking at.
Yeah, if you slide that up a little, we'll see them.
I don't know. I've got so much going on this morning that my screens are crazy. So anyway, here's School News Saturday these days. It's very upgraded. These are some of the headlines that we're talking about today. And if you keep scrolling down, you've got 2-3 months worth of news about college admissions, college closing, campus closings, budget cuts, state budget issues, all kinds of things. And so I'm pretty proud of it. Gene's our editor-in-chief. He finds all the news. I read the news, we curate it here and get it out for you guys so you can know what's going on as soon as possible. So here's the big news this week. I thought this was the big news last week, but actually it has gotten to be even bigger news this week. Of course, last week we had students taking their AP exams online basically for the first time ever, right, Gene?
Well, that was true use of technology forced by a major pandemic.
Yeah, I thought you were going to make a joke that said, well, we thought we were going to have students taking their AP exams, but it's not exactly what happened, but you're right. What happened, and we've been following this since week one, because I was on a conference call listening with the executives from AP and SAT and all the other standardized tests, talking about what on earth are we going to do? This is 2.5 months ago. What are we going to do if we can't have people showing up for tests, right? It was a hypothetical at that point. Maybe they'll be able to show up after all. Everybody seemed to be crossing their fingers, and the head of College Board, which runs AP exams and also SATs, was saying we are rolling out plans to be able to deliver these tests online, and we're anticipating some small technical difficulties, because that's always what happens when you roll out a new online program, but we expect it to go basically extremely well. We're using technology that we've used before, et cetera, et cetera. And to be honest, everybody was nervous, and he sounded nervous, and all of us were nervous, and students were nervous, and I think with good reason. But one of the things that people were most worried about in the beginning about this process was, how are the tests going to be as good as the tests that students take in person? Are they going to be able to gauge student achievement well? Are they going to be able to give the colleges and the students a good measure of whether the students have mastered the material? And just to remind you, AP subject tests are not the same thing as the ACT or the SAT. They're testing on one specific class that students have been taking all year, right? So the reason students take those tests is different. They're not qualifying exams to get into school. They're basically exams that if students, I mean, I know everybody knows this, I'm just reviewing. So if students get a high enough score, they can get advanced credit for entry-level classes. They don't have to take that one-on-one class. They can move on to the second one. So concerns were, how are we going to be able to tell whether students are ready for chemistry 2? How are we going to know whether they're ready for advanced calculus? How are we going to know whether they have mastered this material if we're delivering this test that's 45 minutes long instead of hundreds of multiple choice questions first, right? That was really everyone's concern a month ago. And really the answer to that is, don't worry, because for many, many years, the College Board and other standardized tests have been delivering these alternate test forms in different kinds of emergency circumstances, right? I mean, we even saw it in Katrina. We saw students taking these abbreviated exam forms.
And what did we find out about that?
Well, I'm getting news from the 99s this morning, the Lady Pilots Association, because that's super important. Oh, yeah. Well, what the statistics have shown for years, that those abbreviated tests demonstrate student learning just as well as the longer tests, right? So the test makers were basically saying, hey, don't worry, we know this works. We know that it measures students' achievement and preparedness, because we have decades, years of tests showing the student took this test, and then they also took this other test, and they delivered the same results. Don't worry. And admissions offices don't look at the AP subject tests. They look at the SATs and all those other things, but your AP tests don't really determine, your admissions officers don't see those subject tests. They go straight to the registrar's office to help them determine credit hours, right? So all that's to say that the reason the College Board rolled out the online testing with the AP subject test first, I think, is because the stakes were a little bit lower. So those tests are, yes, they're very important. Yes, they determine college credit, but they're not used for admissions decisions. And so it's a little bit lower stakes situation. And I think they purposely did that because they didn't know if it was going to work. I mean, actually, we know that they did, right? Because, we heard them. We heard them saying, hey, we're anticipating some problems, very candidly, honestly, very candidly saying, we're anticipating there will be some small technical glitches. How could there not be, right, Gene? I mean, all around the world.
How many students participate in this testing process per year?
In a year, about 1 million students take an AP subject test.
So do
1 million.
anything 1 million times.
That's 7 figures, yeah.
You know, running a switch, click, click, click. Do anything 1 million times. The probability of having the occasional technical problem probably approaches 100% that I'm not going to achieve perfection.
We're coming back to that, right? So keep that thought in mind. So those are great numbers. About 1 million students take the AP tests in a given year. That's over all the different subject tests. So not 1 million all at once, but there are all the different subject tests, and about 1 million students, or at least 1 million students took it this year, which I think was pretty close to average. It was really cool to see that very few students decided not to show up for their tests based on all this circumstances. I mean, I want to give gold stars to all the students who showed up, because they didn't do it the way they've done it in the past, of course. In the past, the students would show up at 8 a.m. in their local time zone at a gymnasium and take a 3-hour test. I don't think it's 3 hours, but take a long test. But because they're delivering these tests online this year, right? So for reasons that make sense, but were obviously maybe not the best choices, the College Board decided that each subject test had to be delivered at the same hour all the way around the planet. How big is the planet?
24 hours. It's 24 time zones.
24 different time zones. And how many miles around?
29,000-ish, yeah.
Astronomer over here. 29,000 miles around the planet, all at the exact same hour. The students were going to sit down at their laptops, type their 45-minute essay answers. And then at the end of that hour, in all 29,000 miles circumference of the earth, we're all going to hit submit within a 10 to 20 minute window.
And nothing wrong could possibly occur.
Now, I'll give them credit. They knew stuff was going to go wrong, because how could you look at that situation and not think something was going to go wrong? What I heard, so on a different call than the one you were listening to, Gene, I heard one of them saying, hey, look, our system, so this is College Board saying, our system is ready to handle millions of test submissions at a time. So we're not worried about the bandwidth of our system. He said they're expecting technical difficulties because there's so many other factors involved, right? A student's particular Wi-Fi settings, a student's particular security settings, which browser someone was using, whether the entire neighborhood was streaming Netflix at the same time, like all these other factors. They were anticipating that there would be problems, but he was saying our system on our side, not worried about it, because I think the largest number of students submitting one exam at a time was less than 250,000. So that million student number includes 15 or 20 different subject tests. So he's saying, look, we might have 250,000 students hitting submit in a window, but our system is going to be, it can handle it all.
Yeah, if this guy forgets the history of the backhoe operator taking the New York Stock Exchange off the air for several hours because, oops, he hit the wrong line.
Yeah, somebody was digging a hole somewhere, and here's what happened. Okay, so I'm rolling my eyes because I know something, and I'm being sort of, I'm being a bit catty. Is catty the word? I'm being a little catty. Well, it didn't work out, you guys. So if this is the first you're hearing of this, it did not work out. Now, on one hand, and I said this over dinner the other night, I said, to be honest, I mean, less than 1% technicality is pretty good. I mean, as a business owner, you know, if you make a mistake 1% of the time, you know, that's not so bad. It would be a fantastic record in baseball, an impossible record, of course. But, you know, in this day and age, the reality is if you're a software as a service provider, if you, because one of the other things we do at Rockstar Academics is we're developing some software tools. They're not ready yet, but they're getting really close, you guys. So there's a different standard if you're delivering software, and that's something interesting, right? So there, I've been in business in private practice for almost 4 years now, and private practice is where you interact one-on-one live with your customer, if not in person, certainly live over video chat. But there are different standards, not necessarily higher standards, but different ways that you measure whether you're doing what you're supposed to do. So if you're a software provider or you're providing a service over the internet, which I personally think, you know, delivering test administrations over the internet, they're making this leap across this threshold. The standard is to have an uptime agreement as part of your service level agreement, right? So I'm mixing industries here, which is my daily life these days. But if you're providing a digital product, there is an expectation that you have zero downtime. And then if you have downtime, that you have an instant fix for it for your consumer. So it's different. And I think the College Board got themselves in trouble on exactly that point, because they were thinking, we're academics, right? 1% margin of error is freaking great in economics or sociology or even calculus, right? But that's not what people expect. And it's not what happened.
Yeah. And 1% margin of error is really great. However, that College Board had made it very clear that they did not accept that margin of error in the application process of any student. And I think there's a fairness.
Oh, I gotta stop you. Hold your thought, because he just said. So this is Jack, you guys. Jack the Great Dane. He's our Rockstar Academics mascot, and he's gonna probably join us today. Yeah. We're gonna be broadcasting so long today that we let him come in and lay down, because we're doing a 3-hour workshop after this. Hey, Jack, say hi. Anyway, you hold your thought, because Jean said something great, which was, it's tempting. On one hand, some people are tempted to give the College Board a pass and say, look, 1% margin of error when you've launched this enormous last minute worldwide response is pretty great. But it's not great, because they don't give the students a 1% margin of error. Like, students have to show up on time for the exam. You made this point yesterday, and it kind of stopped me in my tracks. So I'm going to give you a chance to make it again.
Well, I think it's really critical that in our current society, and perhaps even in the historically past, it was true, but I'm less sure, that people have an expectation of a fair deal.
A fair deal. I think that's fair.
You know, and
no pun intended.
In this equation is, if you expect me to be perfect without error, showing up perfectly on time, software ready to go, and all that study that I had to do to be here on time, on target, performing at my best, because this is a really important.
And by the way, if you happen to be a student in Singapore submitting this exam, you had therefore had to show up for your exam at 3 a.m. Right? 24 time zones, all at the same time.
So if you expect that from me, I have an expectation from the folks that I'm dealing with that if I have to be without error, oh yeah, you're going to have to be equally error-free.
Yeah. Well, and this really did kind of stop me in my tracks. And I think you're right. Not that, look, guys, I wasn't exactly giving the College Board a pass. I was just, I mean, this is infuriating. And we haven't really talked about what happened yet. It's infuriating. It shouldn't have happened. Students should be mad. But, you know, it's my nature to try and understand both sides, right? So I'm trying to give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, but really they kind of don't get the benefit of the doubt, right? They're expecting 18-year-olds to make no mistakes, to be on time, to have their software updated, to somehow get their hands on a laptop for so many families, right? Yeah. And then their excuse is, well, we only screwed up 1% of people's lives. It's not okay. It's not, you're right.
And the additional, we only screwed up 1%, the part that I think will really chafe a lot of folks is, so as our gift to you out of our magnanimousness, we'll allow you to do it over.
Guys, wait until you hear this. Okay, so let me finish. You're so right? Let me finish the news story as we leaks. We're doing a terrible job. I would rate us terrible for news, facts, and then analysis, because we skipped right over the facts to the analysis, but it's okay. So here's what happened. So in short, 250,000 students showed up on last Monday to take their first set of exams, which I think was the calculus exam. I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that. But the 250,000 students showed up to take the first set of exams, and 1% of them couldn't, after spending the 45 minutes working out their answers to the test questions and following all the technical instructions, being there at 3 in the morning or whatever, when they hit submit to send their answers, their browser instead gave them error messages. Or it was a variety of problems, and it was not all the same problem, but for a variety of reasons, some students got these error messages saying, we're so sorry, we could not receive your, I actually haven't seen any of the error screen images that they were posted all over Twitter. But basically, in other words, the whole system shut down and went on the fritz for these students, and they couldn't submit their answers.
Yeah.
So 1%, right? So over last week, 1 million students did this, and 1% of them all week long got error messages. So 1% of, I'm bad at math, so Jean, 1% of 1 million is how many?
Only 10,000.
Only 10,000, several, more than, 10,000 up, 10,000 plus. 10,000 students spent an hour on their tests and tried to submit the results and got error messages.
And I may not be correct in this, but I suspect that probably out of those 10,000, probably not more than about 8,000 were enraged.
No, enraged would be a nice way to say it. Of course, and that's true. They were enraged. And early last week, by the end of last week, we were already seeing, of course, there was this petition. I think by Friday afternoon, there were almost 4,000 students had signed this petition to the College Board, which, again, I'd like to commend all those students for trying to go about it, trying the least terrible option first. They tried to submit a petition saying, we want to be able to submit the answers that we wrote.
Right.
Because the option that the College Board had prepared, what was the option was, well, we'll give you
a do-over.
We'll give you a do-over.
But we're not sure exactly what date, but it'll be soon.
Yeah, well, they had the date. They actually did have the date set. So the ants, I'm scooting over a little, make room for the kitty cat. The option, so they got the error messages, and then immediately on their screen or then in their email, they got a response from College Board, again commending them for having this ready to go. I think emergency planning in advance, right? Good. But the students got an email then saying, we're sorry we couldn't accept your test result. You're going to have to show up and take it again.
Right.
Not, we'll figure out how to get your answers from you, but you're going to have to show up at another retest date and take the test again. So the students at the end of last week then had started this petition that was, I think, organized by the folks at fairtest.org, which is an organization that is a watchdog organization, basically highlighting many of the things that are kind of sucky about standardized tests, had organized this petition. So the petition was, just let us it was so reasonable. Just let us submit the answers that we wrote. Come up with a way to certify that the answers we wrote weren't cheating, and let us submit these results. And I think one of the accounts that I read, the student, this was the petition. This was a mom writing at the petition site about what was going on, is basically saying, my student is so distraught. She can't study for any of her other exams. She doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, because
this can cause real panic, right?
If you were a student here and you took this first exam, and you've got, 3 to 5 more that you're facing,
Right.
And so study time for this one, I've got my brain saturated and I do this project, and now you can't accept my data. but I got to take another 1, 2, 3, 4 in front of me. You want me to regain time for doing those studies, and I'm supposed to retain all of this, test taking paraphernalia in my head for next time. I think I'm just sort of surprised that the students weren't with pitchforks and torches marching in the street.
Well, to be honest, that's kind of how it's devolved, Gene. So at the end of last week, there was a petition. Of course, in the last 7 days, things have gotten quite a bit more heated because the College Board has, I think, kind of dug their heels in and said, well, we have this system in place in advance. We knew what we were going to do. Students, you were warned that if a technical glitch occurred, this is what was going to happen. And so their response was basically, we're sticking to our plan. Our plan was you have to come take the test again, which didn't sit well, understandably, didn't sit well. And so the end result is the class action lawsuit was filed early this week. Actually, I think the class action lawsuit was, I think it went to press. We heard about it maybe Thursday. So early last week, the class action lawsuit was getting organized. They have sued the College Board. The article saying, there's an article on Forbes, is the one that we linked to over at School News Saturday. The Forbes article was sort of reporting that the class action lawsuit was demanding damages and accepting the students' answers. So they're demanding not to have to retake the test. They're demanding to have their answers that they wrote last week be accepted. And here's the big kicker. $500 million in monetary relief to these students.
Well, there's lawyers involved. So 40% of that goes to the lawyers.
Okay, so $30 million to be distributed among 10 or 15,000 students because they couldn't submit their answers.
Yeah, so why go to college? I can make my money this way. It really is better.
I don't know. It sort of feels to me, and I know I'm just going to get Twittered to death. The whole thing, it seems to me like everybody's being unreasonable. It just drives me crazy how everybody's being unreasonable about everything all the time. That's a terrible generalization.
Does not get you time in court. I would be surprised if this doesn't achieve a settlement prior to standing in front of a judge.
That's probably true.
There'll be some sort of process. So let me take you down a different news rabbit hole that I just read this morning that you haven't had time to read yet.
Okay.
This lack of SAT. University of California has said that they're not doing the SAT became optional through 2024 at least. And then they will evaluate and perhaps go longer.
I'm going to write that number down. I want to come back to 2024.
Yeah, it's a whole generation of.
Because here's the link between those two stories and something that I want to stay on the College Board for a minute about, which is why on earth all this money, right? And it's partly because there's some serious equity issues, accessibility issues that already exist in standardized testing. It's been going on for decades. And of course, the test optional movement in college admissions has been around for decades. And so already before this little experiment of the online APs even was being discussed, schools were starting to really look at whether or not it was fair to be using standardized test results for anything, but certainly for admissions and certainly for credits. And here's what the law firm that's organizing the class action suit about this recent AP scandal said. So the college, what they said is that it's not only annoying, right, and it's not only unfair. They're actually claiming breach of contract.
Sure.
Which I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to guess, but breach of contract, I'm feeling really sure that they had a statement in the contract that said this could get screwed up. So I wonder about that. But gross negligence, misrepresentation, and this is the one that links to the larger issue, violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So here's the thing. And I'm reading, this is a quote. I don't think I put this quote on my slide, but this is a quote. The quote is, the College Board administered the exam knowing ahead of time That's why I started with all that backstory. They knew ahead of time that some students would encounter problems, and now they're retreating by blaming others and taking absolutely no responsibility. That's from the legal brief filed by the law firm on the class action suit. Or actually, I'm sorry, that's not from the legal brief. That was a statement to Forbes. I'm reading from the article. So, there's a student advocacy group also involved, and Fair Test, like I said, which is a watchdog group, is also involved. But, there's the point, is that they did know in advance that they were going to have problems. And I don't think, and this is just my opinion, this is my opinion only, this does not represent the opinion of Rockstar Academics, only the person who runs it. I don't know what kind of disclaimer to make. I think that they are kind of Scylla and Charybdis here. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place because they did the responsible thing by having a plan in advance. Hey, Jack, what do you think? They did the responsible thing by having a plan in advance. They did the responsible thing by announcing that they had a plan in advance. They did the right thing by telling students what to expect if they encountered problems. So that was the right thing to do. But now, because they said that, now they're getting sued because they say, well, you knew in advance. And I don't think it's okay. I'm not condoning it, but they kind of were sued if they did and sued if they didn't.
Exactly. So the rest of this statement that you don't know, that I read this morning.
Yes, so tell us about it.
Is that various groups now are saying that since we've gone SAT optional, since you've proven you can do this, there is significant reason why you should have never had those tests and should never go back. And that reason being that it discriminates against the financially less able, because the financially more able, of course, have more opportunity for resource study, tutoring, etc. And so it has been a biased and unfair gateway to get into college. So there's a big noise about, let's not do this anymore. Let's more allow the gifted, the bright enough, as opposed to winnowing them out because they don't have money to buy the tutoring to score well.
And that's part of it too. So so you hit on the highlights. So if you're new to this testing optional movement, you could just Google it. Fairtest.org is I think the place where the argument is most outlined at most length. And of course, we've been seeing schools move test optional for several years, but at the beginning of the coronavirus crisis, we saw campuses move en masse to test optional. University of California schools, which is part of California higher education, is the largest higher education system in the country, just by virtue of number of campuses and not to mention population density and everything else. So what they moved test optional, that was really a newsworthy headline. But of course, some very elite private colleges also went test optional. Even Ivy League schools have gone test optional. Many of them have said, we're only going to do this because of what's happening right now, maybe this year only, maybe next year only. Some of them have said, we're going to do this as a test for several years only. Very notably, I can't remember off the top of my head which school. I'm going to try to remember. There was a school, could have been Babson, I don't remember, East Coast private school, actually announced that they'd been doing test optional secretly for several years just to see what happened. No, I'm X that out. That's completely wrong. What they announced was that they'd been ignoring legacy status for several years secretly, which is another inherent bias in the system. Yep. So that school had been ignoring legacy status secretly just to see what happened. And then earlier this year, they announced that they had in fact been doing this to see how it worked out, and then they were going to do it permanently. So anyway, I think the point is that a lot of schools were forced to do something. This is a theme over and over in these broadcasts. A lot of schools were forced to go ahead and go test optional, which is something they may have been considering a long time. And, I've heard a lot of other independent college advising professionals say the same thing. Like, don't really think that schools who go test optional at this point are not that we don't think they're very likely to ever go back. So, if you're seeing schools that are hanging on to those test scores as part of their requirements, that probably means they're going to continue to hang on to them. Schools that have gone, many of them, I don't think will go back because it's not fair. There's just the tremendous amount of inherent bias.
And it's a modest monetary suck from the potential students, but it's a tremendous time suck from them.
Well, so that's what it is. Both the ACT and the SAT have fee waivers available that are pretty generous. So if you need to take that test and you can't afford the $100 or thereabouts to take the test, you can get a fee waiver for the test itself.
Right.
But here's the problem, and again, this is not my primary, my primary field is not standardized testing. But the issue is the questions themselves have inherent bias. It's actually almost impossible, right? As a former educator yourself, it's almost impossible not to write a test question that has some bias. While they try really hard, they say they try really hard, there's bias in those tests, but also there's bias in the process, which is how do you mobilize yourself to prepare well? What if the school that you go to doesn't prepare you as well as the next school? What if you don't have the ability to hire a private tutor to prepare you for the test? All these other ways in which someone with more resources has
they will score higher.
Advantages, if you're like crazy.
Wealthy right. WASP, you're going to do better.
Right. So biases that just let people who already had tons of advantages have even more in the process. The flip side of it is that nobody likes to hear this, and there are plenty of people who will argue against this being true, but they're not a terrible measure.
Yeah.
This is like being, the tallest blade of grass in a forest. They're not a terrible measure, and we don't really have a whole lot of better ways to offer a test of some kind that is equal across all, what am I trying to say? It's
socioeconomic cultures.
It's not equal across socioeconomic cultures, but at least it's bad in the same way everywhere, I guess is the best way to say it.
Well,
we don't have
approaching fair.
It's not a very good ruler, but at least it's the same ruler. And even that argument has some serious flaws in it. And so I guess it's just another way in which the entire system is really full of broken promises. And but I guess that's one of the things that's coming out of this crisis for higher education that is becoming so incredibly clear to people. So those of us on the inside, we kind of known this a while. The system's really broken, and it really makes a lot of bad promises for people. But
yeah.
So tell me about 2024, Gene.
No, I got a different piece of news that you haven't read yet.
Another piece of news I haven't read.
Well, I found it just shortly. You were doing other things, getting ready to have this webinar while I was checking the last of the news. And so for anybody listening who's considering going to colleges within Virginia, because this is state specific.
Another big state system.
Several college deans, looks like a half a dozen or so colleges, on May the 27th is setting up a group virtual tour of their college campuses. Virtual
tours are a big headline this season.
So a bunch of them banded together to do it together. So I don't know how many of our subscribers, listeners will be in there, but I thought I would toss it out because May 27th is not far away. So
virtual tours. So there are some really neat resources for doing virtual tours of camps. This is a big question that I'm answering with new clients for my private practice this year. So I counsel. I'm an independent educational counselor. I work with high school students and their families to help them through the college admissions process. We try to make it a little bit more sane, try to give them a little bit saner approach to finding a great fit college. And right now, the springtime is when we're meeting all of our new clients for the year and matching them up with their coaches so that they can have a guide in the journey. And so right now, if you are a junior, you're finishing up your junior year this week and looking at the summer before your senior year. In a normal year, this would be when you'd be trying to plan some visits to campuses over the summer, maybe driving up to the local university and maybe driving out to private universities or flying across the country to visit schools. And of course, students are not doing that this summer. So what on earth do you do to kind of get a feel for these schools? And virtual tours have been around. They've actually been around 5 or 6 years, maybe longer than that. But really significantly in the last 5 or 6 years, there are a bunch of great options, right? And it's not just watching a video of campus or watching an interview with a student, but real live interaction with admissions officers and professors, and the opportunity to meet people and talk to them in live. So I haven't seen the story, but what you're telling me is that the state of Virginia has created their own very specific to them opportunity to tour their campuses.
They're going to have a Zoom event.
A Zoom event.
Yeah. Some of the colleges participating will be Richmond, Washington, and Lee University, the University of Virginia, the University of Richmond, William and Mary. So they're nobody important there.
I mean, I'll tell you guys, Virginia is to be born in Virginia. For many, many reasons. Now, I was born in the great Republic of Texas, which is a really fantastic place to be from. But for a state of Virginia is also a wonderful place, and particularly for education. You just listed off some of the nation's very, very best schools. University of Virginia, of course, rivals Cal or UT Austin as a flagship public university land grant. Washington and Lee, Richmond, University of Richmond, of course, a great school. What was the other one you mentioned? Virginia Military Institute is there.
It was William and Mary.
William and Mary, tons of wonderful schools. And so what you're saying is all of them have banded together.
And so they're going to, on the 27th, there'll be a Zoom event to tour. And they will also have a question and answer period.
How great.
I suspect it'll be valuable to those who are considering schools there.
So we'll have a link, and as always, we always have a link to all the stories that we're talking about here. The links will be up at School News Saturday, School News Saturday, or School News Saturdays with an S. Either one will get you here, where there will be links. You know, today there'll be links to the news we talked about today. Tomorrow there'll be links to the new news that comes up tomorrow. We try to keep it updated every day. So you can see the College Board articles are here, and all the other stories that have broken this week. Schoolnewssaturdays.com, schoolnewssaturday.com. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually going to take a minute and talk a little bit about, let me see. So we talked about the AP test. Let's see. I want to actually move us along to, I want to talk, oh, I'm making everybody dizzy. Sorry, guys. Yikes. It really doesn't want to show you that slide. So I just want to talk a little bit about what we're doing after this broadcast. Yeah. So this is really exciting. I've been doing 1 day, 2 day, week-long workshops with students and their families. Like I said, if you count all the years that I taught as a faculty member on campus, decades. But I've been doing some of these workshops that are specifically about the college or not decision process, which is what I like to call it. The college or not decision-making process for many years. And what I've done this year in response to all my conversations with families is adapted part of our larger comprehensive coaching process, which is a big 9-module course that gets you from what do I want to be when I grow up all the way through to the applications out the door and submitted. And so what I've done is I've actually adapted one of the very first pieces of that process into a workshop today. It's about 3 hours long, and we're calling it the Goals and Gap Years Workshop. And we're using, I'm going to show you some of the best decision-making science that I spend my spare time and my off time, the off season, studying about how to make better choices. What tools do we have out there to make better choices? human beings, we have a whole bunch of cognitive biases that really get in our way of making good decisions. And we have behavioral scientists have shown over and over again that if you can use tools, there are tools, and if you can use the tools to short circuit that emotion driven choosing process, it really makes a big difference in the quality of your decisions. So today we have a 3-hour workshop lined up for 12 o'clock Pacific, which is about an hour and 10 minutes from now. And I'm going to show everybody who's there. We have several people signed up. I'm going to show everybody who's there how to use some of these kind of cutting edge science decision-making tools to look at the decisions that we're all dealing with right now, right? Which are, what should I do with myself next year? What should I study in college? Should I go to college at all? Is $50,000 a good price tag for Zoom classes? All these big decisions that we're trying to make all at once. And we've put a program together. I put a program together that I really do think is going to simplify the decision-making process some. If not simplify it, at least make it easier to get to clarity about what the right choice is. So if you haven't yet grabbed your spot in that 12 o'clock West Coast time, 3 o'clock East Coast time workshop for today, please go to rockstaracademics.com and click on courses at the top and register and join us today. It's $25 for everybody in the house, and it's worth 5 times that much at least.
Oh, at least. And you see, that's a pretty good price. And you skipped along and talked about how this is a process to make good decisions. It's a tool. It's a mental tool, including some paperwork. Maybe the other part to emphasize here is that it's not just a tool that you can use here for your college year decisions versus your gap year decision. It's like a crescent wrench. It's an adjustable tool that you can use for making all kinds of decisions in your future, because a lot of high school kids come out short on those tools. This can help them.
I will tell you, I've broken the editor's rule of no more than 1 exclamation mark there. I will tell you, I see students every year. I see them struggling so much with how to make decisions. And, we all get frozen by indecision. We get frozen by, I don't like cliches, but the paralysis by over-analysis it's a real thing. And gosh, I see it tripping students up so much. This year I had a student, I've talked so much about this particular student this year. I'm sure his ears ring every Saturday morning. But this student has has really achieved some fantastic offers from really great schools. Mm-hmm. And public schools and private schools, in-state and out-state, where he just wrote some great essays and got some great offers. And the problem is that college is really expensive. It's more expensive than it should be. Shall I tell? The numbers are stunning, and they're very upsetting. One of the reasons that I started this business, and one of the reasons that we're pivoting to using some software tools, building software tools for this, is that it's really difficult to make a good decision. College is so expensive, and the question of whether it's worth it or not has so much to do with whether you did the work in advance to set yourself up so that the very expensive education you're getting is helping you get where you want to go, right? Because a very expensive education that wasn't focused on something that's right for you isn't a good buy, right? As I'll tell that I am not a shopper, but this is a great analogy for moms and dads that shop, which like, if that Chanel suit is a fantastic deal and it's only $50 instead of $50,000, it's not a good deal if it doesn't fit you, right? And so the way you make a good decision isn't really that you get the cheapest education you can find. The way you get a great match is that you get the right education. Because if it's the right education for you, the data is so clear. You can't argue with it. Even when you try to argue with it, all you're doing is tearing down the relative difference, because it is so clear. It's clear over and over again that a college education dramatically increases your earning potential. It dramatically increases your health potential. It dramatically increases the length of your life, because you earn more, you're healthier, you have less stress, you have more opportunities, you're likely to have a network of people and support systems and institutions to help you when you get in trouble. It goes on and on. But if you spend the money on something that isn't right for you, it's not worth it. And so I see students struggling, and I send this student that I mentioned a minute ago, he has got so many great options. And he's frozen by trying to figure out which option is the right option. And it breaks my heart. I don't think I'm ever going to get over this student. I think that's why I talk about him every Saturday morning. I don't think I'm going to get over it. I am not sure he's going to be able to commit. And once in a while, you do the best you can, and you can't figure out, as a coach, you cannot figure out what the client really needs to hear. And I'm not going to get over it. I don't think that once in a while, you just can't find the right thing to say. And I'm very concerned that he's going to stay stuck. And that's one of the reasons I think I've spent so much time on what are the tools that can help you get unstuck, because he doesn't have any bad options in front of him, because he's had a great coach making sure that he applied to the right school. So it's not like he's trying to decide whether he should get a degree in basket weaving. We've lined up great choices. They are all good matches for him. Every single one of them would be a good investment. And I say that with confidence. I can show you, in fact, I could put them on the screen in a second. I can show you, as long as you're getting a degree that's preparing you well for a life that you want to live, and that you've done some basic work to make sure it's a life that will support you, it's worth it. So the tools give you the ability to be confident in a right decision. It's not just making sure you've got good options in front of you. A good coach can help you make sure you've got good options in front of you. But the tools that we're going to talk about today are not just tools for putting good options in front of you, but also for choosing one with confidence, so you can go forward and you can throw yourself into a good plan. Because waiting until you're sure,
tragic here.
Certainty never comes, right? Patrick Lencioni will tell you that. Tom Peters will tell you that. Mm-hmm. Every leadership guru in the world will tell you certainty never comes. And so get good options in front of yourself, right? The environment for good decision making that we talk about all the time. It includes getting good options on the table and getting a good tool for picking one, and then getting clarity and going. That's what we're going to do today. So if you haven't cleared your calendar and you are not planning to join us at 12 o'clock today, I really highly encourage you to stop what you're doing. Go to rockstaracademics.com, click on courses, and come join us for this great conversation about how to use tools to get you out of that frozen state. Now, I kept talking and you had something you wanted to say, so I put that on the screen and I'll say, just go ahead.
Well, where I was going to go was I think this is a great tool, having gone through it with you. While we're advertising it as a tool for setting your goals and a tool for achieving gap year decisions, it's really a tool for critical thinking and analyses. It's probably a 5-day to 5-week course if you really want to do it all. So our 3-hour
That's true.
skip across the surface of knowledge provides everybody a quick set of bullets that allow you to understand, but we're not going to achieve resolution today.
It's true. One of the reasons I do what I do is that it is a privilege to help people get themselves into an environment for good decision making where they have good options on the table and they have some clarity about what's important, and then calming down. Now, those of you who know me, and if you're watching on Facebook, so the people who know me, they're laughing right now about the calming down, but physicians can never heal themselves, right?
Yep.
But getting good options on the table, getting good tools in place to help you choose between them, and then calming down about calming that panic of, what if I make a wrong choice? What if I make a wrong choice? Because the worst choice you can make is no choice, right? The worst choice you can make is waiting until you're sure. Because, you know, the future's still coming, as I say all the time. The future is still coming. And if you're waiting, it's not, right? And so making a decision, that's the best choice you can make. And then throwing yourself into it with a plan, right? With benchmarks for, I'm not going to second guess myself for 6 months. And in 6 months, I'm going to sit down and reevaluate. Until then, I'm 100% in. That's how you give it your best chance of success. It's a privilege to do that for students and for families. Because, you know, I heard a college counselor doing a group session, someone else who does what I do, and was doing a group session for students that I listened in on. And I heard her say, look, you can't make a bad choice when it comes to choosing college education. And I don't like that because I can put this up on the screen and show you, I can show you the reason why she said that. I'm going to do it. I can put this up on the screen and I can show you why she said it. Going to college and getting an advanced degree that prepares you for your life is a great choice. It's really hard when choosing education, it's really hard to make a bad choice. Gene, you seeing that?
I'm seeing it. You were good. The long-term benefits of a bachelor's degree.
It's really hard to make a bad choice, but you can. Yes. And so that's why I don't like that. You can make a bad choice. A really bad choice would be, I'm going to wait and see what happens. I'm going to wait until I'm sure. Those are bad choices. But if you don't get yourself in an environment for good decision making, you could make a bad choice there too, right? Because if you haven't evaluated logically instead of emotionally, all my friends on Facebook are laughing at that too, right? Logically instead of emotionally.
Yeah, they just fall off the couch.
Falling off the couch. Physicians can never heal themselves. If you are making an emotional decision instead of a logical one, you can make the wrong decision. Yep. If you are, if you're not calm and you aren't choosing between great options, you can make a bad decision. Mm-hmm. If you are not using good tools to look at all the factors that are important to you, you can make a bad decision. If you haven't decided which criteria are the important ones and you're making a decision based on the wrong priorities, you can make a bad decision. But choosing education is not a bad decision. So, I mean, here are some statistics here. You know, one of the reasons I think students get paralyzed is because they talk to a lot of people who are still relatively around their age, right? Or they look Sure. at the news and they see within the first 10 years after college is not when to be looking at whether it paid off for you. A different graph, that's not the one I'm showing right here, shows that in the 4 or 5 years after graduating with a bachelor's degree, many graduates are making less than a high school graduate would have. Well, why? The high school graduate's got 4 years of job experience and the college graduate has 0. And so of course they got some catching up to do on the life experience thing. But it's kind of like, you'll love this, as I've got an engineer in the room. I like to make the analogy. It's like 2-part epoxy. You've got 2 tubes. You've got to squeeze out the glue from one tube and the glue out from the other tube, and you've got to mix it up. This doesn't glue anything over here, and this doesn't glue anything over here. It's not till you get them together, right? So you've got to have education and experience to really get the benefits. So the first year out of college, you've got the education, but you don't have the experience. Mm-hmm. And the high school graduate has the experience, but he doesn't have the education. So if you're looking there, right, it's easy to say, oh, well, it didn't pay off. But you watch as the years go by, that college graduate is starting to combine that education that he already had with the experience in the other tube, and he's got more, right? And so by the end of their careers, there's no comparison. The average, and this is only on the average person with a bachelor's degree will earn almost twice as much in his lifetime as the average high school graduate. And we're talking about quite a lot of money. We're talking about $500,000 more over their lifetime or something. And so these are numbers from long-term longitudinal studies here, right?
Yeah, you look at those numbers, and I think this is one of the things that the recent high school graduate will not yet have a good file on is talk to older people, talk to people that have had a career. Don't talk to your peer group about what will pay off. What's the experience of your peer group? Well, since they're your peers, they're essentially the same experience as you have. So talking to an echo chamber gets you echoes, it doesn't get you knowledge. And as this graph clearly shows, the more years of life this person has had, the more value this education has for them.
It's true. And I want to highlight, there's no doubt that what you just said is so true. I just want to highlight this figure right here. I hadn't seen this figure until I was having a conversation yesterday with another entrepreneur in background in education. I actually didn't know this number. So this is something to really keep in mind, guys, because this is one of the fears that we're going to talk about that you've got to quiet. Well, we're going into a recession, and I just can't afford college now because we're going to a recession. And this number right here is one of the starkest divides. And so it's a bigger divide than the amount of money that you might be able to earn. Although that is tremendous depending on the field. But the relative unemployment rates between someone who has higher education, and someone who doesn't. And the numbers, by the way, numbers for associate's degrees, which are some of our country's most highly competent people, associate's degrees in skilled trades and engineering and all kinds of, the trades are huge. So an associate's degree also counts here, although the divide is not quite as big. But advanced education is one of the best insulators against unemployment. It's unbelievable, these numbers.
And what you alluded to there but didn't go down was, I can't afford this education because we're stepping into a recession, is short-sighted thinking. If I'm starting college today, I'm looking at least 3 to 4 years before I will be stepping into the job market. So when's a better time to start education than when the economy is in a downturn? Because I'm missing out on the least amount of grief out there with the downturning economy. I'm gaining new education skills so that when the economy begins to recover, I'm stepping up with a position wherein I can gain the most on the curve.
It's true. I'm just laughing because I think basically the summary of this last little segment is there couldn't be a better time to be starting college. Yeah. Within the industry, we talk all the time. It's counter-cyclical. In economics. This is a counter-cyclical industry, which means when every other industry is doing terribly, education is usually doing well for that exact reason. Right. Your opportunity cost of getting an education right now is much lower than it was 3 years ago when we were experiencing a boom. Hi, Jack. What do you think? So that's true. We really don't know what the next couple of years holds, but if it's true that it holds a tremendous recession, it's a good time to go to school. Of course, it's not a good time to sell the house to go to school, and those numbers are often really misleading because education doesn't have to cost that much, but investing in some kind of advanced education is the best insulator you could possibly have against the worst financial scenarios.
And if there's not a lot of job available for you today with your educational achievements of your past, there's no better time to be increasing your educational achievement than when there's no jobs available. So
it's true. If you still have more advanced education that you need for your career, full stop, whatever it is. If you don't have that education right now, it's a bad time to be trying to get a job because you're competing with, what is unemployment today? What's the current number?
It's huge. It's 20 million-ish.
20 million unemployed people right now out there. And some of them are highly trained and skilled and with, many years of experience. And you're competing with those folks for an entry-level job because they're unemployed and they might take an entry-level job. So it's not the best time to try and get an entry-level job. But it is a good time to go ahead and get some of those skills under your belt. And
right.
So
you may be increasing your debt load, but you're increasing it with the plan of being able to make more cash and therefore be able to afford it in the future.
Yeah. So we got to wrap up here. It's 10 minutes after the hour, and we are getting ready for this great workshop that we're going to have this afternoon. But I think in summary, of course, nobody's suggesting nobody's suggesting that some of the highest price education is what everyone ought to do. But I'm a firm believer in education and training and skills. I think now is the time to do that. And I'm really excited about the workshop today to be able to help people make some decisions about how to keep moving forward. So we're going to sign off, say goodbye to Facebook for now, and we're going to go get ready for our workshop at the top of the next hour at 12 o'clock. So rockstaracademics.com, click on courses at the top to come join us at 12 o'clock for the Goals and Gap Years Decision Making Science Workshop. Cool.
It'll be fun.
All right, you guys have a great Saturday.